Today, we're hearing a confession from a 52-year-old woman who quietly lost her self respect while trying to be a good girl for years. Mrs. Stephanie, how much of yourself did you shrink just to keep everyone pleased? And what was the moment that hurt you the most?
The moment that hurt the most was when people started looking at me like a suspect instead of someone they trusted. And what made it even worse was this: I didn't deserve that look, but the silence I kept for years so the peace wouldn't be disturbed didn't protect me that day. I'll admit it. I was always the organized one. I made everyone's job easier, filled in the gaps, and said, I'll handle it. I volunteered for the Parent Teacher Association at our neighborhood elementary school. In the beginning, I truly just wanted to help. Then, little by little, they started saying things like, You're more meticulous, you're calmer, your handwriting is neater. At first, those words sounded like compliments. I believed them, but really it was just task distribution. I finished someone's delayed work. I hunted down someone's forgotten receipt. I did that very night the task someone else said, We'll do it later. I even went home and filed the receipts one by one. That was my habit, not questioning even when I had doubts, not asking because it would feel rude, silencing my inner voice so things wouldn't escalate. Sometimes I even convinced myself if I cause trouble, people won't like me. Even now, saying this out loud makes my chest tighten because I confused approval with love. I thought fitting in was the same as disappearing. Then came the school fair. The schoolyard was crowded, the stalls closed, the donation boxes were emptied, and the money was counted. I prepared the envelope, I wrote the amount, we locked it in the cupboard. The next morning, a message popped up. There's money missing from the cash box. And the amount, it wasn't small. My first reflex was the same old good girl reflex. I wrote in the group chat, there must have been some confusion, let's not panic. And that wasn't even enough. I added, I'll cover the difference if necessary. Look at that. Money is missing and I'm still volunteering to pay just to keep the peace. If you ever think, if I stay quiet, it will pass, please realize this. You're silencing yourself, not the problem. Send the story to the woman in your life who is always managing everything. Maybe for the first time, she'll feel less alone. That same day, an emergency meeting was called. We sat around the table, envelopes, receipts, lists. The president got serious and said, This needs to be explained. Then his eyes moved around the room and finally landed on me. The only thought in my head was, if I stay silent today, I'll never respect myself again. And right then, someone raised their voice slightly and asked, Who counted the money last? The question hung in the air. No one spoke for a second. Then I raised my hand without thinking. I counted it, I said. My voice sounded calm, but my heart was pounding. Then someone asked you who had the envelope, and suddenly the papers on the table looked like evidence. That's when I felt it. The story was already being written in people's minds. Me, the organized one, me, the meticulous one. So the responsible person could also become the suspect. Again, my good girl side took over. Instead of defending myself, I tried to smooth things out. Maybe there was a mistake while counting, I said. Maybe a receipt was recorded twice. Even with no evidence, I searched for the mistake in myself first, because for years I've been taught this. If something is wrong, find your share first. I thought that was maturity, but sometimes it's just living ready to blame yourself. I was like that as a child too. When voices rose at home, my mother would say, Be quiet, don't get involved. When I stayed quiet, the room calmed down, and I thought that calm meant success. And now I was doing the same thing again, shrinking myself so tension wouldn't rise, managing discomfort instead of searching for the truth. If this sounds familiar, stop for a moment and ask yourself, who am I protecting, and who is paying the price? During the meeting, someone said, you were always in charge anyway. Maybe it wasn't meant as an accusation, but it carried a sharp edge. I wanted to say, I was in charge because no one else wanted to be, but I didn't. Instead, I explained everything in detail, minute by minute, because good girls believe the more you explain, the more people will trust you. Then the president asked loud enough for everyone to hear, Did you have the key the whole time? That question shook me because it didn't feel like a question meant to solve anything. It felt like a question meant to assign blame. In that moment, something became crystal clear. If I stayed quiet, this story would be pinned on me. If I shrank myself like I always did to avoid making a scene, This time I wouldn't just lose time, I would lose my name. And for the first time, I thought, sometimes you don't speak to be loved. Sometimes you speak to respect yourself. I took a deep breath. I need to say something, I said. My voice trembled, but my words didn't. I did this voluntarily. But volunteering doesn't mean saying yes to everything without question. I'm not paying to cover this gap. If there's a mistake or bad faith, we find that first. The table went silent. Some people looked away. Something strange happened inside me. The guilt was still there, yes, but beside it was something I hadn't felt in a long time, a small piece of self-respect.
That's incredible. So, what truly brought you here was that habit of not disturbing the peace. Where else has it silenced you before?
Everywhere. And the most dangerous part is this: I even treated my silence like a virtue. When I finished speaking at that table, one woman immediately said, "But this is a school. We don't want fighting here." Someone else added, "Don't accuse people." The way they looked at me changed, as if speaking up was a bigger crime than the missing money. Right then, my old self wanted to step in. I wanted to say, okay, I was misunderstood, and back down. Calm everyone down, keep the peace, go home and punish myself in private. That's what I had done for years. But this time I heard myself say, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm already under suspicion myself. That's why I'm speaking up. For a second, no one said anything. Then I continued. The receipts are here. The count list is here. Is there a photo of the envelope? Is there a bank deposit slip? We can't pin this on one person and close it. The president cleared his throat and said, let's stay calm. I've heard let's stay calm for years. Most of the time it's used to manage tension, not to find the truth. And while I was busy managing tension for years, I had forgotten the truth. I am calm, I said, but I won't be silent. Then for the first time, I set another boundary. And one more thing, I said, if there's a shortfall, I'll cover it. I take that back. That wasn't good intention. That was my old habit, speaking. Why should I pay for someone else's mistake? If I'm wrong, tell me. A wave of shame rose in me because good girls are taught that even taking back a sentence is shameful. But instead of crushing that shame, I watched it. Let the shame speak, I told myself. This time I'm speaking the truth. The meeting dragged on, and then a detail appeared in the papers. On the day of the fair, a second small box had been collected, and people said it arrived at the last minute. I had never seen that box because my habit was always the same. When someone said, I handled it, I didn't question it. When someone said, I'll explain later, I waited. There was no record of that box, no receipt, just words, there was a box. So I asked, where is the record? Who saw it? Who counted it? Unease spread across faces. Because for the first time, someone wasn't being compliant. For the first time, a woman was choosing clarity over being liked. That's when I realized something painful. For years, I had been trying to buy approval and calling it love. I swallowed my pain so no one would be upset, thinking it made me valuable. In the next talk, I'll explain where that belief came from and what it cost me, because so many women confuse it with love and shrink their lives. Please don't miss it. I have more to say. By the end of that day, I said, this money issue will not be closed. The bank receipt will be found. If it's not found, an official report will be filed. And from now on, every count will be done by 3 people and every transaction will require 2 signatures. The moment I said it, it felt like a door closed inside me, the door back to who I used to be. And for the first time, I felt this. People may not like me, but I will not run away from myself anymore. When the meeting ended, everyone dispersed, but the real issue didn't disappear. That evening, my phone didn't stop. Some wrote, you were misunderstood. Others said, we should have discussed this internally. The most common message was, someone like you wouldn't have made a big deal out of this. As if what was too big wasn't missing money, but my voice. And I realized this, when people like the good girl, they often like the comfort she provides, the one who doesn't ask questions, the one who doesn't ask for accountability, the one who says okay to everything, because when she's around, no one has to look in the mirror. The next day, I walked past the school and saw 2 people whispering. They stopped when they noticed me. A mother passed by and looked away. I kept walking, but an old habit surfaced inside me. Go apologize, smooth it over. Then I told myself clearly, I'm not trying to smooth it over. I'm trying to correct the truth. That evening, my family called. Why are you involved in things like this? They asked. You're doing something good, and now you're getting yourself into trouble. Look, it's a familiar trap. People assume that if you do good, you won't set boundaries. If you do good, you won't question anything. If you do good, you'll pay the price. I accepted that for years because I carried a belief inside me. To be loved, you must endure. Endure. stay quiet, manage everything, as if suffering made me more valuable. That day I started a notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Whenever I speak, I feel guilty." Then I wrote the reasons underneath. My mother telling me to be good when I was little. Friends saying, "Let it go, don't make a thing of it," when I was young. Of people placing the burden of "you'll handle it" on my shoulders. It all led to the same place. My compliance made it easier for others to escape responsibility. If you're staying silent somewhere because you think it would be rude to speak up, try this once. Form one polite, clear sentence and share that sentence with us in the comments. You don't need to write a long post, but one of your words might touch another woman's life, because change begins when we share what we know and offer each other courage. A week later, there was a second meeting. This time, I wasn't the one covering it up. I was the one following through. The bank deposit slip was still missing. The person who said, "I'll bring it later," still hadn't brought it. The old me would have said, "Okay," and closed the subject, but I only said, "Then we're starting official proceedings. This is the school's money. We can't leave it to anyone's conscience." When I finished, the guilt returned again, but this time, along with guilt, there was something else. The weight of standing up for myself for the first time. And strangely, that weight felt good. When I mentioned official proceedings, some faces froze, because now it was no longer something to sort out among yourselves. What surprised me most that week was this. Instead of saying, "Let's find the money," people started saying, "Let's not let this get any bigger." As if the danger wasn't missing money, but my clarity. That night, a message came, "You misunderstood us." Another said, "By doing this, you've put us all under suspicion." The old me stood up immediately, apologized, smooth it over, make peace. But I told myself, I'm not blaming anyone. I just want the truth recorded. That's all. Still, it wasn't easy. When I lay down that night, my heart raced. There were moments I was angry at myself. Why did you do that? Why didn't you stay quiet? My mind was trying to sell me silence, as if I would be rewarded for it. And what was the reward? People seeing me as easy. In other words, approval. For years, I had replaced self-respect with approval, so I made a small rule: I won't over-explain myself. Unless something is truly critical, I won't write pages of messages to defend myself. Because I realized this, the good girl reflex, the moment it senses tension, rushes to victimize itself. I did that for years. Before the conversation even began, I would pocket the guilt. Second rule, I will ask for everything in writing, not "I'll bring it later," but a date, a time, a document. Even saying that brought up shame, because women are often taught to manage, not to request. If you're holding back right now because you think, "I shouldn't ask, it would be rude," please don't do that to yourself. Then what I expected happened. That box that appeared later started landing on someone else's shoulders. He brought that box. He saw it. He counted it. In that moment, I drew an important line. I'm not pointing fingers. We'll talk about procedure. We'll talk about records. Because as I let go of the good girl habit, I didn't want to fall into another trap. I didn't want to seek justice and become part of gossip. One day they pulled me aside in the schoolyard. "Because of you, people will be afraid to volunteer," they said. And for the first time I answered, "Volunteering isn't a place without accountability. On the contrary, it should be the most transparent place." The moment I said it, something clicked again inside me. I would no longer try to buy love by letting myself be trampled. I'll go deeper into this in the next conversation, because most of us believe, if I put up with it, I'll be loved. And that belief keeps us silent for years. By the end of that week, a document surfaced. Part of the money that was supposedly deposited had never actually been deposited. Someone had said, "I'll handle it later," and then tried to cover it up so the issue would be closed. Warmth spread through me. So I'm not crazy, but right after that came a heavier truth. I've been trained for years to look away from things like this. And that day, I set a third rule for myself. I will never say, "I'll cover it if necessary" again, because what's missing isn't made up with money. It's made up with boundaries. This is how you regain your self-respect. As for that issue, the official process began. Procedures changed, people scattered a little, but the real change wasn't the school, it was me. Because that day I finally saw what the good girl mold had done to me. It didn't make me confident, it made me useful, and through all of this I learned something else. Being useful is not the same as being valued. If you're like me, I want to tell you this. Don't sell your silence as kindness, because one day that silence will speak for you. And saying no isn't rude. Asking for something in writing isn't causing trouble. Being clear isn't being bad. Looking back, my good girl habit destroyed my self-respect in 3 stages. First, thinking it was rude to ask questions. I thought asking for transparency was disrespectful, but respect isn't covering uncertainty. Respect is creating clarity. If something feels off, tell yourself, I won't dismiss my intuition. Intuition isn't proof, but it can be a signal. Second, explanation addiction. I thought the more I explained, the more I'd be understood. But some people treat explanations as a sign your boundaries are softening. At a certain point, explaining becomes a door the other side uses to convince you. So now I ask myself, am I explaining to tell the truth or to be loved? Third, the reflex to carry the cost. Saying, I'll handle it can look like sacrifice, but sometimes it's just fear. Fear of not being loved, fear of being excluded, fear of conflict. I lived with those fears, and I learned this too late. Acceptance gained by shrinking yourself is not love. What shook me most was watching some people distance themselves from me. When I became clear, some people got uncomfortable, but then I realized the ones most uncomfortable were usually the ones who benefited from my silence. I felt alone for a while, and I want to tell you something small. If one day you end up alone because you're clear, sometimes it isn't punishment. Sometimes it's a change of direction. Choosing your own side creates a void at first. And let me add this. I grew up believing if I endure, my value increases. So whenever guilt appeared, I reached for pain, as if suffering would make me more righteous. But suffering doesn't automatically create what's right. In the next conversation, I'll explain how this belief gets planted in us and how what we call love is sometimes just habit and fear, because many women believe they have to exhaust themselves to deserve love. If someone asked me today what changed, my answer is simple. I don't abandon myself to look good anymore. If something is unclear, I clarify it. If something is wrong, I say it politely but firmly. And most importantly, I stop that little girl inside me from chasing applause. Thank you for listening. If you're staying silent somewhere in your life to keep the peace, choose just one place. Just one. Set a small boundary there. It doesn't have to be a huge revolution. Start with a message, a single sentence, like, can I have that in writing? Or I can't do that. Then breathe and let the guilt move through you, because guilt doesn't always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it's just the last gasp of your old role.